Juletane by Myriam Warner Vieyra Thursday, August the 24th, 1961, 1 p.m. Despite a very restless night, I feel fine today. I stayed in bed till lunchtime, and Vieyra and Mamadou have not come back yet. The radio is broadcasting the speech made by the head of government from the holy city. I catch words: national effort, development, first 4-year plan, etc. Why does Awa turn the radio up so loud? Especially to listen to a speech she cannot understand a word of, since her French never got beyond her first few scarcely intelligible efforts. I go and search the living room, hoping to find something to read. Apart from Vieyra's Rosewater literature, there is the National Daily from the previous day. I flick through the adventures of Cowan Doyle, The Treasure of the Mossy, by Buster Diaf. Nothing of any substance. I go back to my room and pick up the notebook which is on my bed. I open it and allow the past to surge up in a flood of memories. The day I arrived in the country, nothing happened the way I had imagined it would. I was not coldly received by the family, quite the opposite. As soon as we had disembarked, a whole crowd of aunts, cousins, sisters, and even my rival, took me by the hand and kissed me. The women were all talking at once. The national language mingled with French. One of the aunts tapped me on the cheek, showering me with what were certainly words of welcome. I didn't understand a single word, and contented myself with smiling. I lost Mamadou in the crowd. We were reunited half an hour later. After a 20-minute ride in an old black taxi with hard seats, we reached 33rd Street, Uncle Lassen's house, where we were to live. The women took charge of me. For a moment I managed to forget my troubles. All around me there were nothing but smiling faces. I forced myself to smile with everyone too. Refreshments were served. I greeted any number of children, of neighbors, of relatives, more or less distant, who had come to welcome us. The local imam took both my hands, palms upraised, recited a few verses of the Quran, and, to my great astonishment, spat in my hands, which I passed over my face, as the other women did. About 2 hours after our arrival, the meal was served. A delicious dish of rice and fish, with dewina, a sort of melted butter. The one that I had eaten in Paris, at Friends, resembled it only very distantly. Seated around the bowl I could dissect my rival at leisure. She put the best pieces before me, smiling at me so insistently that I wondered if it were from kindness or from mockery. In any case I decided on a truce, especially since, having refused the spoon I was offered, I had to concentrate on making little balls of rice which I then put into my mouth, like the others. Although my desire to leave was very strong, I had to yield to the reality that it was not going to be a simple matter. In fact, the expenses of our journey had swallowed up almost all our savings. We had just enough money to live very frugally until Mamadou found a job. After we had eaten, I was able to see Mamadou alone in the little room which we had been given. Once more I tried very calmly to bring up the subject of our separation, because for me that was the only real solution. I did not want half a husband, neither did I want to take a little girl's father away from her. Mamadou refused to see my point of view. You are making a mountain out of something insignificant. I was forced to marry Awa, because the family had arranged it from when I was very young. The only woman that I chose, that I love, is you. My one concern is to find a job and a place to live as quickly as possible. Everything else is secondary. When this long tirade was over, far from being reassured, I wondered what love meant for Mamadou. I could not understand that he could have married someone simply to please his family. I did not want to believe that he had the dishonesty not to tell me before our marriage, and, now, the audacity to be surprised that I should refuse to accept a situation that I had not chosen. After 8 days of this ambiguity, Uncle Alassan, with whom we were living, had a talk with Mamadou and communicated to him the decisions and wishes of the family. They would accept my coming most willingly, but on no account would they agree to a separation from Marwa, who had waited for him faithfully for 5 years. Arwa had gone back home to her native village, to Mamadou's parents' house, where she had been living since her marriage. From the next weekend on, Mamadou would have to go to her. Mamadou told me that he had no choice, and that if we refused we would be ostracized by the whole community, that it would be impossible for us to live in the country, and that he had absolutely no intention of going to live anywhere else. So, he proposed that I should agree until he got a job and a place for us to live. Then he would find a reason to break with Arwa. In short, I was to accept having a husband for 5 days, since Arwa agreed to have him on weekends in the village. It seemed to me that I was on another planet, for I no longer understood what was going on around me, what was being said. As far as I was concerned, a husband was above all the most intimate of beings, another self, not an object to be lent or shed. In a week Mamadou became a different person, a stranger I had just met. I no longer understood his reactions. I was choking with anguish and with unprecedented rage. He remained very calm, happy to be alive, to have come back home to his country and his friends. He would carry on conversations for hours in its native language, with no regard for me. We had to pay a great number of visits to friends and relatives. Whenever we went out he would introduce me, then forget me in a corner, like some discarded object, surrounded by a group of women who were smiling and kind, but who spoke no French. Saw him at a distance, chatting with the men. Neither could I understand this sort of segregation, where women seemed to have no importance in a man's life, except for his pleasure, or as the mother of children. They were not companions and confidants. An aura of mystery surrounded the affairs of the husband who, as sole master, made all the decisions without ever worrying about the wishes and desires of the women. The wives, ignorant of their husbands' real financial means, spent their time vying with each other as to the number of outfits and jewels they had, the messenger's wife wanting to have as many as the directors. This sometimes created tragic situations, when at the end of a month the husband found himself with debts which far exceeded his total salary. Constantly tense, on edge, I had no appetite. The delicious midday rice and fish, with daily repetition, no longer tasted as it had the first day. The smell of it nauseated me. I was losing weight. My skirts, which now were too big, made me look like a scarecrow. So when it was time for Mamadou's first weekend with Arwa, I was in a sorry state, physically and mentally. I tried to accept it, telling myself that in any case it was all over between us, that as soon as I had the chance I would go back to France. I would get a divorce. However, it was too much for me to bear. I remained locked in our room without eating or drinking. Mamadou did not come back on Sunday evening as expected. He arrived on Monday at lunchtime, looking happy. Arwa sends her regards, the family too, he said, smiling. You can do without giving me a message like that, I replied. In spite of all my resolutions, I was dying of jealousy. I could not keep myself from thinking of Mamadou with another woman as a sacrilege. Mamadou, my only treasure, my most precious possession. When I married him, it was more than a husband, it was a whole family that I had found. He had become the father who had died too soon, the friend whom I had always dreamed of. I had never kept anything about myself from him, even my present pain and sorrow, I did not have the decency to hide from him. The second weekend, my anguish was so acute that I lost all notion of time. Today, I can remember nothing. It is as if I was unconscious for 2 days. The third weekend, when Mamadou left for hours, his uncle took me to the hospital. I was deeply depressed, really raving, or to use the doctor's expression, I suffered fits of delirium. I do not know what happened to me. I vaguely remember being overcome with a sudden, desperate rage during the night between Sunday evening and Monday morning. I began breaking everything in my room and banging my head against the walls. I did not come to my senses completely until 4 days later in the hospital. Aunt Katie, Uncle Alassan's wife, was standing next to my bed. She explained to me as best she could, with lots of gesticulating, what I was doing there. It was a Thursday. I had been in a semi-conscious state for 4 days, probably because of the injections I had been given to calm me. I felt good. My mad rage had given me relief. The rest cure had done me good. Mamadou arrived. His presence irritated me. I could not understand how the man I had loved, that I still loved, had in so short a time become this stranger. For a year we had been together, and he had never mentioned his first family, nor this child who was his daughter. Why? What I blamed him for most of all was that he had hidden the truth from me. He had not shouldered his responsibilities, and then he had waited for the family and Uncle Alassan to make all the decisions. What a pathetic case! Or was I the one who was being unreasonable? I was surprised at the behavior of the people around me. The very ground seemed to be crumbling under my feet. I was struggling in a strange irrational world. I wonder if it was a good thing to have started this diary, to be trying to remember a past more filled with sorrows than with joys, to dwell on a present built on troubles, on solitude, despair, and on a vague feeling of acceptance of a non-existence to which the regrets and resentments of the past have given way. Stirring up all that, isn't provoking a sleeping tiger? And Elia's laughter and raucous, unpleasant voice bring me back to everyday reality. She is back from their visit to the marabout. Mamadou and 2 colleagues who travelled with them are back as well. They are in the drawing room. I hear the clinking of glasses which Vieyra is taking from the sideboard. In spite of the household's financial difficulties, there is always enough to buy beer, and Vieyra's favourite drink, and Mamadou's whiskey. Mamadou's 2 colleagues won't leave until the bottle of scotch is empty. And Vieyra, for once very astute, divides a new bottle in 2 or 3, and never gives those 2 a full bottle, since she knows their practices very well. Yet they have just celebrated Mylad meditating and reciting the Holy Quran. Apparently they are good Muslims. At home, they keep no alcohol, so as not to shock their families. Besides, it is more economical to drink at someone else's house. Mamadou, who is more candid in this matter, buys his whiskey and drinks it openly in his own house. At his parents' I suspect he is just as hypocritical. Yes, everything is a show. The essential is to appear rich, generous, temperate, a good Muslim, open and honest, a good husband. Meanwhile you are stone broke, selfish, alcoholic, Lying, you never take care of your children and you neglect your wives. Only the latest wife counts, the empty-headed creature whom you call a modern woman, whom you shower with jewels. I hear snatches of their conversation. Mamadou says he is thinking of going to France for his next leave with Ndaya, who is dying to see Paris. I can't hear what the others say. All the same, I wonder where he thinks he will get the money for this trip. As for me, I never dream of Paris or anywhere else anymore. I have buried once and for all everything that goes on outside this house. My life unfolds in room 5 paces by 4, and under the mango tree in the yard, where I eat my meals. Once more the radio is blaring, this time the 8 o'clock news. I exchange my newspaper for my bed. No shower, no dinner either. As long as the visitors are in the house I don't remember if Mamadou asked me to do that. I think I decided on it on my own, except when it comes to Ndaya's friends, who always sit under my window in the courtyard, and who disturb me with their gossip. Then I do my best to scandalize them. The more Helene read, the more she felt drawn towards this woman. She felt her suffering, and the difference between them. She was sure she could never love a man to the point where she lost her reason over him. Her love affair in Paris, when she was 20, had proved to be a real vaccination, which protected her perfectly against falling in love. At the time she had believed a fellow countryman's declarations of love. He had formally begged for her hand in marriage. They had even exchanged letters with their respective families. Their parents had arranged a big dinner party back home in honor of their engagement. Helene was in her 2nd year at the School of Social Work in Paris and Hector in his 3rd year of medical school. They had agreed to wait 2 years before marrying, long enough to allow Helene to finish her studies and to work for a year, in order to save something towards setting up house. The 2 years went by quickly and uneventfully. 2 months before the wedding day, Hector had sent his best friend to announce to Helene that he had been married the previous day to a French girl who was expecting his child. He had not wanted to tell her, because he wanted to save them both from a painful scent. To top it all off, he had the nerve to say that the marriage was a matter of honor, and that he still loved her. Helene had forced herself to keep her dignity, to hold her head high, and not to cry in front of his friend. She looked at him with contempt. The hypocritical little black, full of complexes, who thinks by marrying a white woman he is acquiring a passport to success, she thought to herself. And isn't it a matter of honor, when you have been engaged to a childhood sweetheart for 2 years? When Hector's friend departed, Helene had locked herself into her room for 2 days with her grief, weeping, moaning, cursing Hector, giving full vent to her disappointment. When she managed to compose herself, her mind was made up. A woman could live by herself. She had sworn never again to suffer because of a man. She made a bonfire in her bathroom sink with Hector's letters and photos, and barricaded her heart with a block of ice. She asked to be transferred overseas. Since then she had worked in several African countries. She had set out to pay Hector back through every man she met. She would use them for a while, then as soon as they seemed to be becoming involved, she would stop seeing them without any explanation. She had agreed to marry Osman because she wanted a child, and because in accordance with her old-fashioned ideas, she preferred the child to be born in a legitimate union. One thing for sure, she thought, she would never put up with any infidelity on Osman's part. Helene lit another cigarette. She had started smoking to look emancipated and liberated, and had acquired a taste for it. Now she smoked 2 packets a day. She intended to stop one of these days. It was the only concession she would make to Ausman, who did not smoke. She went to the kitchen to pour herself a whiskey on the rocks. Her parents had been scandalized the last time she was home on holiday because she preferred to have whiskey rather than the delicately flavored little punches. She had seen Hector again for the first time since their broken engagement. He had settled in their homeland and had a successful medical practice. She had accepted an invitation to dinner at his house out of curiosity to see the kind of woman he had preferred to her. He had introduced her as a childhood friend, without mentioning their previous relationship. Hector's wife was a small blonde, dumpy, faded, dressed like a scarecrow, without charm. She seemed much older than her years. She did not work, but looked after her home and her 6 children. She fussed constantly after her offspring, who were particularly turbulent and undisciplined. He told Helene, as he took her back home, how much he regretted not having married her. His life, it appeared, was a living hell. Helene had burst out laughing. No, there was no way Hector could move her. She had her block of ice firmly in place around her heart. She had told him about her life in Africa, free, pleasant and with no ties. Then, to amuse herself, she had excited him. They made love in the car, on the beach. Skillfully she had managed to keep him with her until the small hours of the morning so as to infuriate his good wife, and then left him sheepish and drained. She had accepted an invitation to see him again a few days later, but had not gone. She had not seen him again during her stay on the island. Smiling at the memory of the trick she had played on Hector, Helene went to lie down, fully dressed, her glass near at hand, and buried herself once more in her young compatriot's diary.